Welcome back to Heretics and Heroes, everyone. Anyone who's been following the channel knows that I'm an Imperial Guard player, and like any good guardsman, I know how to listen to my superior officers. Here on YouTube, the supreme commander of the Guard is undoubtedly Mordian Glory. He's really become required viewing for any Guard player, but you may know him in other ways. Perhaps you're a historical wargaming enthusiast who mains certain factions because you really like the uniforms. Well, not to worry. Mordian was your knight in shining armor against the dreaded midwinter minis. Or maybe you just love some good drama, and you are waiting with bated breath for the epic conclusion to the legendary beef between Mordian and Vanguard tactics. All joking aside, I'm a big fan. Mordian actually inspired me to start YouTubing. So, I'm gonna build and paint for him a custom officer as thanks. I'm aiming to make this a proxy for Ursula Creed from Mordian's, well, Mordian army. She's a senior officer, so we need a suitably posh uniform. I think the tank commander body from the Cadian upgrade box will work beautifully. And you can't go wrong throwing some bits from the Castellan kit in there. Let's get everything cut and cleaned. I do want to try to use the lower half of the officer here, so we'll just trim off the part where it connects to the tank. I have these Cadian sergeant legs I was going to use for another project, so we'll just go ahead and cut them so that we can attach them underneath the officer's coat. That looks like it might work, but they're a bit short, so we'll do some green stuff work later. In the meantime, let's work on the upper torso. This is a Creed proxy, so naturally she'll be a woman, but this is a male torso. So let's shave down the waistline a little bit to cut a slightly more feminine figure. Subtle though, we're not gonna bimboify our officer here. That looks good enough to me, and we can refine it later with some green stuff. Let's take a look at the arms. The sword arm is easy, just gonna attach it as intended. The gun arm will require some work. I want to use the left arm from the Castellan box, but it only has half a cuff. So let's snip that off and steal the cuff from the pointing arm. Never mind that it's a right arm, just rotate the cuff and it works fine. Ursula Creed has her daddy's special twin pistols, so I think our Mordian Creed needs a special gun too. I've taken one of the pistols from the Skitari box and trimmed a few bits off of it to streamline it. Now we need a left-hand pistol hand, which there aren't that many of. Luckily, the Skitari saved the day again with this bionic. Time to put the legs on. I've just pushed a mess of green stuff up into the torso and placed 2 balls where I want the legs to go. Smash those legs on there and do a little sculpting to make them look like legs, and here we go. Let's attach our gun arm and see how she looks. I'm not certain I love the gun sticking out to the side like that, so I decided to try a different arm. The last step is to construct the head. No proper Mordian would be caught dead without their peaked cap, let alone an officer. But there are no female heads with proper peaked caps, so I guess we'll have to make one. We are going to very, very carefully cut the hat off of one of the Castellan heads, and then very, very carefully cut the top off of one of the female heads from the Cadian upgrade sprue. We will then shave and sand down both until they fit perfectly. Time to put it all together. Well, that is unfortunately rather underwhelming. I really don't like how static it is, and the legs just look slightly unnatural in the angle that they attach. Time for plan B. As luck would have it, I have one of the old Cadian command squads lying around, so we can use the officer's legs from that. In order to get the legs to fit, we're gonna need to shave down the back a little, since it's conflicting with the cape. I did also replace the boots with the new Cadian boots. They fit perfectly. Last, we'll reattach the gun arm. Now we're talking. On to the final finishes. To cover the belt that I've cut to pieces, we'll give her a sash. Throw in a cheeky pistol holster and add the pre-made sash from the Castellan, and we're good to go. I'm also going to press some green stuff into the clothes on either side of the sash so I can sculpt in some more sophisticated looking clothing folds. To really complete the Mordian look, we of course need some epaulets. We'll need to sculpt these from scratch. First, I'm going to create a circle cut it in half. These half circles will go on the shoulders to form the top part of the epaulets. Under the half circles, we're going to need some dangly ropey bits. That's a technical term, by the way. We can do this by just forming some rectangular sheets and using sculpting tools to press lines into them. These came out a bit long in places, but once dry, I can simply trim them with a knife. The official Creed model comes on an elevated base, so to avoid modeling for advantage, we'll have our girl stood atop some corkboard rubble. And with that, we are finally done with the build stage. That was a lot more work than I was expecting, but I like the results. Let's look at how old Morty paints his guard. The Mordian 50th rifles prominently feature a green dress uniform. While doing research for this video, I started looking up Napoleonic War uniforms and found this. Looks great, but one problem. They're French. Are we gonna take inspiration from the French? I think not. We need something British. I like the look of these. Let's look up this 95th Rifles Regiment. And wait, who is that?
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Now that we have our good and proper British inspiration, I can confidently say, God save the king.
You got a license for that?
Chippy makes a 98 needle loss better.
Okay, now that that's out of my system, let's fucking paint. To start, I'm gonna lay down some dark, dull base coats. I really liked working from dark to light in my last project, so we'll do something similar here, though less extreme since I'm going for daylight lighting conditions. Once we have the model mostly blocked out, it's time to start bringing up the color. First, we'll slowly build our midtones, then we can start working on some highlights. About midway through painting the blue, after looking at some references for navy fabric, I realized I needed to bring in some purple, especially in the darker parts. For the jacket and sash, I'm going to be doing the exact same process, so let's turn this into an epic painting montage. Many thin layers later, here we are. The gold epaulets and chest eagle are next. I'm going to be going for a gold embroidery look. So what I think we'll start with is Baylor Brown as a base, then I'm going to wash it with Agrax Earthshade and Reikland Fleshshade to get some of the shadows. Then it's time to just build up to our highlights again. On the top of the epaulets, I'm going to let my brushstroke show to imply the texture of threads. And we're going to bring our highlights up much further in order to show some shine. Awesome, time for my favorite leather recipe. We're starting with Rhinox hide, then building up into flat brown. We'll go from flat brown into scrag brown to give that nice leather patina. And finally, we'll do a mix of scrag brown with sunny skin tone to just do a bit of light weathering. Let's move on to some metal. No, not that kind, I meant gold and silver. I'm going to go ahead and just lay down a base coat of all my metallics. Next, we'll wash all the gold in Reikland Fleshshade, highlight with gold, and do a final highlight with silver. This is my standard gold recipe, nothing fancy going on here, as opposed to the sword, where we're going to do something very fancy. What I'm going to attempt to do is use non-metallic metal techniques, but using metallic paints. I've never tried this before, so I have no idea if it will work. The first thing I'm going to do is hold the sword under the light just to get a sense of where the highlights and shadows should be, using the shine of the true metallic paints as a guide. The sword is base coated in silver, so using chainmail and then gunmetal, I'm going to start sketching out the values. The real secret to making this work is in the introduction of some subtle coloration of the metallics. I'm going to be doing this by just mixing in a little bit of normal paint into my metallics, and then glazing them over the areas that I want to tint. Once we've finished with that whole process, it's on to the power sword lightning effects. To sum this up quickly, we're just going to glaze a little blue into the areas closest to the power node, and then build brighter closer to the node we get. We'll finish it all off by just drawing some electrical discharge with white, and voila. Apologies if that was a little draw the rest of the fucking owl. The video is already quite long. We're also going to briefly go over doing the wood grain on the gun. The technique is pretty simple. I'm just painting horizontal lines on the surfaces I want to look like wood, and with each pass just using a slightly lighter brown to create depth. Finally, we reach perhaps the most important part, the face. I'm starting this off by base coating with Vallejo red leather. I find this is a very versatile color for flesh tones. You can push this up easily into lighter skin tones and then use it as a shadow tone, or you can shade it down and get some more tanned flesh tones as well. Next, we'll darken the eye sockets to help give the eyes some definition. I'm using Vallejo burnt cadmium red, but any dark brown will also work. Now, I'll paint the whites of the eyes. This is pretty hard to do well on camera, so all you get is this little dab, sorry. For the rest of the face, what I'm doing is simply layering up the parts of the face most likely to receive light. I'm also pushing some violet into the areas below the cheekbones to help add some color, and on the top of the cheeks I'm pushing in some red and some pinks for the highlights to really help the skin feel alive. I think the best tips I can give for faces is that you definitely want to have a brush with a very sharp tip, and you need to be patient with it. The whole process will usually end up being like a tug of war between the highlights and shades. You'll be going back and forth, bringing each up and down as needed until you're finally satisfied. With the face done, all that's left to do is the white and black details and the base. I'll be shading the white with some cool gray mixed with contrast medium, then just layering up until we hit pure white, and for the black I'll be gently highlighting with dark gray, except for the areas I want to shine where I'll go all the way up to white. Let's play her out with another epic painting montage. Well, there she is in all her Mordian glory. This is maybe the best paint job I've ever done. But you can always learn something, so let's criticize myself. I spent way too much time blending colors on certain areas of the model, like the pants and the jacket, and in the end, I think it was a waste of time. Many of the areas that I liked most on the model didn't really require much blending at all. Things like the gun, the sword, and the boots. And the areas I did spend all that time on, in retrospect, they look a little flat. So the lesson we can take away from this is that absolute fidelity is not necessarily the name of the game. Things like lighting and contrast are much more important. Thank you all for watching the video. I do intend to send this out to Mordian himself. If any of you were wondering why she didn't get a base, that's because Mordian asked me not to. He's gonna do it so that it matches the rest of his army. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. In addition, I have a huge announcement. I have just launched a Patreon where you will be able to access such benefits as a private Discord server, behind the scenes content, audience polls to help decide on future videos, and additional tutorials not found on YouTube. At the higher tiers, you can even send me photos of your work for personalized comment and critique, and get private painting lessons. Thank you all so much once again, and as always, I'll see you on the tabletop. Or maybe in the Discord if you join the Patreon.